Lakewood City Council meeting in the city of Lakewood, Colorado on January 13th, 2020 in council chambers. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ball.
Here.
Springsteen. Here. Goodwine.
Here.
Skilling. LeBure.
Here.
Abel.
Here.
Vincent. Here. Vita. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Franks.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to council chambers tonight and for coming out to participate in your local government, or if you're watching us at home. I would ask that if you did have a phone to please put it on silent, and if you'll join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silent prayer. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. The clerk, please read item 4.
Item 4, Resolution 2020-1, appointing a member to the Budget and Audit Board.
All right, I'll now turn it over to the committee chairwoman, Ms. Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. I just wanted to acknowledge that we have nominated Christopher Scott to the position, and I didn't know if Christopher was here tonight. Hi, nice seeing you.
All right, and the whole family, welcome. It's nice to see you. We're excited to have you on board. And okay, so is there a second?
Second.
All right, a motion and a second to approve resolution 2020-1, the first one of the year. Please cast your votes. The suspense. Councilor Springsteen? There we go. Passes 11 ayes, 0 nay.
Congratulations.
Thanks for getting all dressed up. Okay, will the clerk please read item 5?
Item 5, Resolution 2020-2, appointing and reappointing members to the Lakewood Advisory Commission.
And as I read the names of those that we are nominating, if you would stand or raise your hand to acknowledge that you're in the audience. We have Jamie Cornell, Marcia Osborne for being appointed, and then reappointments are Bernie Barthel, Heidi Barthel, Rigby Johnson, Peggy Ralph, and Dave Rain.
All right, we'll give you a clap now. We're assuming you're all going to be elected in, so we're voted in. And we also did receive a letter from Ms. Osborne, who wished that she could join us tonight. She's excited to serve, but she had something else that was scheduled prior, so we welcome her as well. Can you make a motion? Can you make a motion, please?
I move that we approve these nominations.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second to approve resolution 2020-2. Any conversation? Seeing none, please cast your votes. All right, passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. We'd like to thank you all very much for, one, your service if you're being reappointed, and to our new folks who are taking the time to get involved with their local government. It really means a lot to us. You do a lot of wonderful work, and look forward to hearing from you as we move forward. Item 6.
Item 6, Resolution 2020-3, appointing the Mayor Pro Tem of the City Council of the City of Lakewood.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Abel.
Thank you, Mayor. Because of his efforts to reach consensus on nearly every issue he addresses, and the collaborative way he compiles legislation, I'd like to nominate Councilman Mike Beta as Mayor Pro Tem.
I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and just as a housekeeping item for the folks, so nominations come from the floor, and we will take this up here, and there's also something sent earlier today that a potential nomination, if this doesn't pass for another member of the body to be Mayor Pro Tem. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion for Councilor Bita for Mayor Pro Tem? Please cast your votes. And that fails 7 nays, 4 ayes. The nays being Paul, Gutwein, Skilling, LeBeer, Vincent, Franks, and Harrison. Thank you. Ms. Franks, do you want to make your motion? Go ahead.
So I would like to nominate my co-counselor, Counselor Skilling. It has been an absolute honor to work with him for the last 2 years. He is a leader in helping to draft quality legislation. He helps all of us, I think, see things through a good legal perspective and brings good balance. And so I am thrilled to nominate and do a motion to nominate Counselor Skilling to Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. And that passes with 8 ayes, 3 nays, the nays being Councilors Springsteen, Bita, and Johnson. So I'd like to take a moment and thank Councilor Bita for putting your name in the hat. We had some good conversations, as well as our new Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Skilling, and thank our outgoing Councilor Abel for your work this year. And I'm sure you're going to miss sitting next to me, but maybe we can arrange it on the other side here.
If folks could only hear what we whisper to each other.
It's a lot of love, but in all seriousness, appreciate your time and your service and stepping in when I certainly wasn't able to, and representing the community. All right. Next up, we have public comment. This is the point in the meeting where the public is invited to address the City Council on items that did not appear on the agenda. All comments should be directed to the City Council. I ask all in attendance to observe the decorum of the City Council chambers and refrain from applause or audible support or discord with the speaker. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The lights down here will be green, and then at 2.5 yellow, time's up red. I'll politely ask you to wrap it up. After that, if there's anyone who did not sign the public comment roster who wishes to address the council, after that's done, you can come down and make sure you see the clerk. Please. Do I have a roster? Okay, we're waiting. Sorry. Sorry, Madam Clerk. I was going to say, holy cow. We're cruising right through. All right. First up, Mr. Rodriguez. Good evening. Welcome.
Mayor, City Council. So in review of the citizens' approval ballot question 200 to curb housing growth, right? So basically what's happening is lack of housing costs go up.
Thank you.
So what's going to happen is people are going to have to start digging into their budget. And so they're going to pull out of their food budget, and another budget is going to be transportation. And so when we start thinking about service workers in general, you know, public transportation is going to be it's going to be important. And so our sidewalks, our bike pathways, those sorts of things, we need to make sure that are available to our service worker community, but also our pedestrians. And so I've been contacted by Donald Keynes. He's going to speak next. You know, he has an issue. You know, he's one of those service workers that we need in our community. He relies on public transportation, and so that pedestrian right-of-way is so important for him. But, you know, he almost got hit twice by reckless drivers, and so he went to Lakewood Police Department and said, "Hey, I have this issue," and that happened twice already. And so he's not getting any resolve. And so I'm in here to talk about these issues and to support him and his efforts to communicate that, you know, this is an issue and this is quite important. And so if we think about our service worker community, we need to be listening to these folks. You know, this is quite important. And so I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Mr. Keynes, you're up next, sir. And then I have Carolyn Wolfram and then Charles Davis. Good evening.
Hello. So I prepared a statement that I'm going to read to you. Dear members of City Council, I come to you as a concerned citizen of Lakewood. Safety is a big deal for me, and as of recently, I have felt more and more unsafe in Lakewood as a whole. It seems that more and more reckless drivers are coming to Lakewood, and I live in an apartment community where elderly, disabled, and little children live at 5800 apartments at Alameda and Harlan. I have consistently seen drivers racing in this intersection with pedestrians and cyclists almost getting hit. In one such case was around 10 o'clock p.m. on a Sunday right before the new year, where a driver ran a red light and almost took me out in the process. I called 911 and still no response to this day. And another instance was on Christmas. I called the police around 6:30 p.m. on another instance involving a reckless driver. And I was basically being blamed by the officer who responded to the call, trying to make me the bad guy, when it was clear that, from my perspective, the guy definitely was trying to do it maliciously. I've had enough of this. You know, I pay through my tax money for these officers to do their job. And when they blatantly admit, and this is I actually have a case number from that instance on Christmas. Let the record show LK 19144-017 is that Lakewood Police call and case number. And the agent who responded admitted to me that there was nothing that they were going to do and that it's not going to be investigated. And this has become more and more a habit. And I want this on record that this needs to stop and this needs to change. They are dishonoring their oath, like the Pledge of Allegiance, liberty and justice for all, and the Section 1 of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which states, "No shall all citizens born and nationalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction of our citizens of the United States and the state of which they reside."
Can you wrap up your comments, please?
Basically, I'm being deprived liberty and justice without equal protection of the laws. So this needs to change.
Thank you, sir. Carolyn Wolfram, Charles Davis, Matt Boyles after that. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight. I come to you tonight with one concern regarding the implementation of 200. It has nothing to do with timelines, allocations, or anything else related directly to actually building homes. My concern stems from many conversations I've had with others who live in the city regarding how the planning staff is being treated as this process unfolds. Many in our ward, which is 5, and community are concerned that staff, although an impartial group, have experienced negative treatment as they bring up concerns in navigating all this. You all know that there are significant effects that occur in any workplace where employees do not feel valued by the entity or people they are working for. On the business side, productivity decreases, quality of work decreases, toxic relationships develop. I am personally more concerned with the human side of all this. I worry that our staff not feeling valued might have significant effects on their mental health and their physical health, along with negative effects on their relationships with families and friends. Altogether, the business effects, along with the human toll, have an enormous effect on the bottom line. The line being discussed tonight and in recent months is something virtually every citizen and employee in this room and city will have to live with. I, along with many others, are very concerned that treatment of staff and their understandable reactions to that treatment will have huge consequences as we implement 200 and beyond. I ask council that when you are collaborating with planning staff that you presume positive intentions in every move the staff makes. I implore all in this room to use language with staff that meets their need for respect. Lakewood has a planning department filled with people who are very good at what they do and want nothing but the best for Lakewood and its citizens. I hope that we all remember that, always. I, as a citizen, thank council and most certainly our planning staff for this hard work that you are navigating through. You are appreciated more than you know, and personally, you couldn't pay me enough to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, then Matt Boyles, Doc Palmery, and then Liz. Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, Council, staff, and Mr. Cox, fellow citizens of Lakewood. My name is Charles Davis. I am the co-chair of Two Creeks Neighbor Organization and founder of Northeast Lakewood Advocates. And I wanted to personally apologize for Mr. Abel's childish and demeaning and unprofessional disrespectful behavior at last Monday's council meeting. His complete lack of respect for the mayor, council, and staff that was shown in his back and forth with the mayor deserves to be publicly called out. As he most likely won't apologize for behavior, I will. Ward 1, the institution of city council, the citizens of Lakewood deserve better. I'm sorry.
You. Matt Boyles, Doc, Liz, and then Lenore. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Matt Boyles. I'm the president of Crash. As some of you might know, we met with Amber and Jim, so Jim from the Parks Department, last Friday to discuss our continuing use of Bear Creek Lake Park. They mentioned that they were concerned with a potential loss of revenue, so we agreed to cover that to a tune of $1,200 this year and perhaps more next year, depending on that. They did mention that the signage that we had started to place cut down on any complaints that they may have had. So we have agreed to increase that signage to get that level of complaint down. We also offered to integrate our website so that our schedule can be placed on the Bear Creek Lake Park website so that anybody there will know that we are flying those days. So those were the concessions that we were willing to make. We hope that perhaps city will be willing to make concessions and allow us to continue the activity that we have done there for 34 years now. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Doc? Liz, Lenore, Meg. Good evening.
So Brian told me that he was going to give me his 3 minutes.
So we don't pool like that.
Okay.
Just go ahead. Brian, did you sign up? Brian signed up. All right, just go ahead and go, and hopefully you can get it done in 3 minutes.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to the councilors and Mayor Paul. My name's Dr. Mark Palmier. I go by Doc by my friends. I own 2 businesses in Lakewood. One is called Space Voyage, which is a program to empower kids. We don't use solid fuel in that program, but as I've learned about this rocketry thing, I saw it as a fantastic way to turn kids on to STEM. I have originally wasn't a part of it, but I have become a part of the team, so I'm now a part of the leadership team. I've encouraged them to step into the 21st century by paying their way, and also I'm pushing for this crash unit, this rocketry club, to initiate even a waiver that parents would sign to help their kids. It was a pleasure to meet with Amber and Jim this last week in your beautiful building right here. I'd never seen it before. It was wonderful. And it was nice to see everybody working in good faith. There was comments made about a new place over by a high school that was like 40 acres. But doing this myself for 30 years now, it's a real liability to launch rockets over Kipling Parkway. So I'd like to see a way for us to work together. And I see some real positives. There's a real sense of servant leadership from the rocketry group, where they shared with Jim, the park manager person, that they actually pick up trash every time they go out. And that was surprising to me as well. I see the Rocket Center out at Bear Creek Lake Park as a wonderful thing. If they could pay their way, they can use the shelter there and use the restrooms. There would be no conflict with people having weddings. I actually see the Rocket Center out there as a pillar to help Lakewood become an all-American city. And I volunteered now 3 or 4 times to different people in the government of Lakewood, and I'm volunteering now that I'd like to see Lakewood become an all-American city every year that it's capable of being an all-American city. Lakewood's been an all-American city in 2006 and 2011. And I don't know who's in charge of that, but I volunteer my time to do that. So I think it's a great way. I think we just have to find a way through it. We talked at that Thursday meeting about that meeting over here with Amber and Jim about the complaining. People had complaints. And as a psychologist, I brought up the idea that it was maybe people crying in their beer, maybe they were, yelling at the crowds as we do when we're having a bad day, because there wasn't a single written complaint or email or anything like that. So it's okay for people to complain. I have bad days too, and we're all allowed to have that. It's just a great resource. I'm going to work hard to serve as many Lakewood kids as I can. I'm going to send an invitation from me, Doc Palmier, to each of you to invite you out, and I'll be your handler. I will make sure you have a good time. I was fortunate to purchase somebody who retired from the Crash Group.
Wrap it up, please.
Yes, moved to Sterling. I was able to buy all 300 of his rockets. I have a whole bunch of rockets that you and your grandchildren can fly as part of me. So I want to be a part of making this move forward, and anything that I can do, I'd like you to try to include me, or please allow me to help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Liz? Nor Meg and Kathy. And then Brian, if you want to come back up, you can.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just want to make one real quick comment about television recently. I see a lot of Lakewood Police lately on the television, and that breaks everybody's hearts. So I know that there's not maybe the whole crew that can be there. I know that it's replenishing. So I sure hope that things like you're speaking of can be taken care of. So off my notes, we've been unable to locate the last compromise that was discussed at the January 6th meeting regarding the Ballot 200 initiative. Originally, there were the 4 options offered by Mr. Hutchison, one being no change, that were referred to and were shown for reference. I personally found it very informative when, in fact, those were on the overhead. We could look at them and decide. When you were referring to some of these, unfortunately, I was not able to follow it. I would have been able to follow, maybe to pull that overhead back again and pull those bullet points out. So what I'm trying to find out is, where is that document? Because I just am unable to find it. But if somebody could direct us to find out where that is, because we're wondering what that compromise looks like. Thank you all.
Thank you. Lenore? Good evening.
Evening. I'm a firm believer in transparency and accountability. This includes accepting responsibility for one's mistakes. Whoever was involved in the writing and distributing of the May 10th, 2019 memo regarding building permits put forth inaccurate and misleading information, which has led to a backlog of applications. This was issued without informing City Council. So now some of these council members are putting in endless hours to come up with compromises and plans to deal with this mess. Instead of trying to bail out the staff, let them suffer the consequences of their overzealous and reckless actions, whatever they may be. If lawsuits are filed, so be it. I don't feel that the initiative should be used as the sacrificial lamb to resolve these problems. For years, there have been members of council who have enabled staff's overreach by turning a blind eye or actually supporting their actions. I suspect this will continue for years to come unless something is done to stop it. Councillor Skilling's proposal suggests suspending the formula for determining allocations until 2022, when this backlog will be resolved. He fails to mention the provision for council oversight on projects greater than 40 units. Why should significant aspects of 200 be delayed or changed to appease staff's demands? There seems to be an organized effort to sabotage 200 without ever implementing it as approved by voters. If the planning department employees are overworked, perhaps it's because they're busy attempting to alter 200 rather than following it as written. I would like to remind everyone that 200 is the law. Let it be, do not change it. If problems arise over the next year, they can be addressed and corrected. Find another way to dig yourselves out of the hole that you created. I'd like to believe that you can figure it out without subverting the will of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Meg York, Kathy Kentner, Natalie Menton. Good evening. This could be a first for a long time.
Well, yes, I'm a little nervous, so bear with me. So my name is Meg York, and I'm an ethnomusicologist, so that means I play ethnic music. And I understand that there was an executive order 13888, and there was some movement about that about a week and a half ago. So I apologize if that's already been decided in favor of. But I'm just going to read the letter I got from the International Rescue Committee asking people to come up and thank and be in support of this. So if I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time, at least you'll get a little clarinet in about 30 seconds, okay? So, so I'm here to thank you to support the passage of a consent resolution by the City of Lakewood that would allow newly arriving refugees to continue to be placed within our community in compliance with the Executive Order 13888. Lakewood should pass a local consent resolution to demonstrate our support for our newest refugee neighbors and for our existing neighbors who are hoping to reunite with family members approved already for resettlement in the U.S. I was out of town when this first happened about 2 weeks ago, so I just want to say thank you, because in the follow-up letter it says that we're pending to approve this in the City of Lakewood. That's all the information I have on that, and now I'm just going to play you a little song. All right, so this song is called Gole Sangam. It's an Iranian folk tune, and as you know, Iran is in the news. And I wouldn't know these beautiful melodies if I didn't have refugee and immigrant friends. So I'm very emotionally attached to it, and I'm sorry, but that's where I'm at right now, and you can probably imagine why.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate that. That was certainly a first, and we encourage anybody that would like to come to public comment and play an instrument. It would be music to our ears. Kathy? Maybe you should come play an instrument, but not the not the recorder though, please.
Get enough of that during the day. Thank you. Good evening, Council. I'm Kathy Kentner. I'm co-petitioner of the Lakewood Strategic Growth Initiative, which is now our law. On July 2nd of this year, voters passed the Strategic Growth Initiative with the following ballot language. Shall the City of Lakewood limit residential growth to no more than 1% per year by implementing a permit allocation system for new dwelling units and by requiring City Council approval of allocations for projects of 40 units or more. On July 12th, that and the full text became law. I'm here tonight to address the resolution you have scheduled for the end of this month, a resolution that should follow the current law and honor these two cornerstones of the Strategic Growth Ordinance. At last Monday's study session, it became apparent the Council is leaning towards a compromise put forth by Councilor Skilling. This compromise neither fits the four corners of the document as stated, nor does it fulfill the promise of large projects having public hearings in front of you, City Council. The Skilling compromise would require you to either change or suspend large parts of voter-approved language. And it doesn't even begin to address the second cornerstone of the ordinance, that large projects be approved by you, City Council. How and when does Council plan to alter or suspend parts of this ordinance? Because that is what you must do if you plan to consider the compromise put forth by Councilor Skilling. Just some of the parts which would have to be suspended include these listed right here. Instead of growth proceeding as it should in a timely manner, this compromise will have us proceed in a haphazard, potentially punitive manner, where we hold place for projects which may never be built at all and tell other projects that they have to wait or, worse yet, revoke permits which have already been granted. Most concerning, the proposed compromise does not even address the other pillar of this ordinance, that large projects have a public hearing and come before you and be decided by you, our elected officials. Instead of a compromise, however, you do have one amazing option to consider. I ask you to please add to the January 27th agenda an item that sets allocations as prescribed in 14.27.050, subtracting, of course, any units already granted permits since July 12th, and direct staff to start scheduling hearings for all outstanding projects of 40 units or more. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Menton. Assuming this one might be RTD.
It's a mix.
All right.
Natalie Menton, Ward 5. So I'm going to try to hustle through, update real quick on where we are with the RTD service reductions. I'm sure some of you, if maybe not all of you, have gotten some communications regarding the proposed service reductions. Tomorrow we will have a presentation at our committee meeting going over some final tweaks that are occurring before we go out to the public. Those timelines to go out to the public about this discussion will be occurring really through the month of February. So there will be at least one or two within the Lakewood area to discuss two main routes that are affecting riders. The one is the 16L running along Colfax. There is currently also the 16 that runs along Colfax. If the 16L goes away, that means it will be a longer ride for those people. The W line is right to the south of it, but that is like a trolley. So we can talk about Express on the W. We're going to have to get around some tweaks. That's really not on the agenda right now, but just recognizing that that's been a problem since day one, since we, hit the bell ringing. The bigger concern that many people have had is the 99L, which until 2 days ago was called the 100L. That was just a scheduling change, and yes, it did create confusion among some people. That runs along from Ken Call Park and Ride all the way up to the Federal Center, going then down to Civic Center. The main problem, the main thing is going back to 2013. There are, yes, people who want to go to Denver Union Station, the north side, but there is an equal amount or substantial amount of people who want to go to Civic Center. The 99L is what does that for them. It's probably going to go through. We'll probably eliminate the route. We're in a bind. People should know that as an alternative, there's the 87 limited stops that runs along Wadsworth. Let me just shoot you some times real quick. The 99L people, right now, from Federal Center to Civic Center, that's about 25 minutes. If they were to take the W line, take the Metro bus, the free ride, not the shuttle one, but the Metro, it's a little faster, they're going to be at about 42 minutes, so it does double the time. An alternative is a 16, that's a little bit less time. The 87L, though, from the Hampton Park and Ride, if you can think of that one just south of 285, or it runs along Wadsworth. It stops at Wadsworth and Jewel. It stops at Wadsworth, Mississippi. It goes right over here to Belmar. If we had some sort of a parking area for those people, I might be able to just say, I'm sorry, 99L people, you're going to have to go down to the 87L and take the Wadsworth in. The time there, though, let's just say it's Wadsworth and Mississippi, that's 26 minutes. That is completely comparable. Am I supposed to be watching a light somewhere, or am I getting comped?
Ran out of time.
I'm special. I ran out of time.
But as a director of another body, if you want to continue with that RTD information.
Yeah, so there are alternatives. It is not the end of the world. That's what I want to share with you. Right now, though, we are, I don't know if you saw headlines today on us again dropping a tremendous amount of routes because we just don't have the drivers. We don't have the workforce. I talked to Steve Bell at the school today. They're facing the same problem. They don't have enough drivers. These two routes are not the only routes being cut. We're not singling anybody out. We are paying $1.3 to $1.4 million in overtime each month. Over $1 million a month in overtime. We can't continue on this route financially or on the workforce. So something has to be done. So now I'm going to be done with my thing. And I know you did address the zoning, but I have to kind of chuckle when I read the language, and I'm done. I am going to send this to you. I just want to note one thing. I'm being sarcastic.
We do have public comment on that.
I know, but I don't know that I want to hang around.
It's going to be quick, I promise.
I will weigh that out, okay? All right. Thank you very much for the additional time.
Thank you for the RTD update. That's what we'll put that under. Anybody else wish to speak?
Mike Muller.
Okay, come on down. Good evening.
Good evening. You know, it's amazing. I wasn't really going to speak tonight. I was just going to sit here and enjoy the mess. But I have to commend all of council. The amount of brain damage that was done on Monday night, last Monday, was extensive. And some of us, like me and a few other people, can't spare the brain cells. You swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States and to the laws of the city of Lakewood. It is a law, guys, and you are supposed to follow those laws. That's what you swore an oath for. And I think Charlie held everything from going out in the weeds. That meeting could have gone for another 20 hours. Charlie did an admirable job of keeping it out of the weeds, staying on point. My point is, we shouldn't even have that meeting. There should be no compromise, no how, no way, not ever, none. Follow the law. I don't know why it's so hard. What's so hard about it? I heard at a meeting on Saturday all the reasons in the world not to follow the law. But there's still only one. It's your oath. You were told to follow the law. You agreed to it. I expect you to stay to it. No compromise, no how, no way. I don't think you guys think you're kings or princesses or princes, that you can just rule roughshod over everything. It's the law. Follow the law. I don't know how many times I got to say, there were 75 people here that were saying, Charlie, thank you for your work. 75 people said, follow the law. You guys still can't get it through your thick noggins. Follow the law. I'd like to be able to stand here and ask each one of you, are you going to follow the law? If you're not going to follow the law, get out of your chair and go away. Follow the law. Does anybody have a problem with that? It's so simple. No excuses. Follow the law. You think it's funny? You think it's funny that people are getting upset with you because you don't want to follow the law. You want to change the law. You think it's funny? What the hell's wrong with you? Nuts. Follow the law, Mayor. You're not a king. All hail King Paul. All bow to King Paul. Don't ever do that again.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your comments. That's okay. All right, that exhausts the roster. Anybody else wish to speak? Maybe we can have some more clarinet. No, you're cool. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So 2 parts on our first 2 speakers. I saw Sergeant Alish brought you a note, so sounds like we're already on top of that. And your problem, unfortunately, is not unique to the whole city of Lakewood in issues related to speeding, pedestrian incidents. I think we had 9 pedestrian fatalities. 7 of them were jaywalking. 8 of them were jaywalking. So we are certainly aware our Lakewood Advisory Commission is engaged, and we're looking at different ways. And I think it, unfortunately, is priorities and balancing, the police workload and what they're responding to and what other things are happening. I wish we could be everywhere when everybody needed us, but certainly it looks like you got some sort of follow-up, and we're going to continue to address this as a council, I think, not only pedestrian safety, but traffic safety. It was a terrible year, not only in Lakewood, but the whole metro area. So thank you for coming out, and hopefully we can continue to work with you on that. And then the second part of that follow-up is, Liz, I don't know if we had the presentation online, but we can certainly try to find that slide for you and get that to you. But I'm sure we have it in an email form that we can get it to you. So, okay, you're welcome. All right. And then there was another question about the refugees, and that will be something that we'll take up under general business tonight as a council. So, okay, thank you. Manager's report, Mr. Goldstein.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, at risk of embarrassing our city clerk, just 2 quick items. First, I wanted to share that the U.S. Department of State conducted our annual passport audit, and we passed with flying colors, so congratulations to Michelle and her staff on that.
Nice job.
Feel free to come renew your passport or get a new passport. You can do it right here at City Hall. And then second and final, in an effort to avoid confusion with the Lakewood Cultural Center, we have launched a new branding campaign for the Lakewood Heritage Center called Heritage Lakewood. We had people going to one facility when they thought they were going to the other facility. In addition to the new branding, we've changed the logo and some other things to help avoid confusion. So with that concludes my report.
All right, well, thank you. I'm sure we'll still continue to mix it up for a while. Okay. So next up, we have the consent agenda. The use of the consent agenda has been made to expedite council action. It contains both resolutions and first reading ordinances. Resolutions are items of a routine nature. Members of the public will have an opportunity in a moment to comment on any of the proposed resolutions. First reading ordinance appear on the agenda only for the purpose of setting future public hearing dates and ordering the newspaper publication of the proposed ordinance. No public comments will be heard this evening on first reading ordinances. The public will have the opportunity to comment on the proposed ordinances during the scheduled public hearings on the date set tonight by City Council. Any council member may request an item on the consent agenda be removed for separate discussion and action under general business. Will the clerk please read the consent agenda into the record?
The consent agenda consists of items 9 through 13 inclusive. Item 9, Resolution 2020-4, designating the public place for posting notices of public meetings during 2020 pursuant to CRS 24-6-402. Item 10, Resolution 2020-5, directing city staff to create an in-house city attorney position and forming an ad hoc city council committee to establish the general parameters for in-house city attorney recruitment and compensation. Item 11, Ordinance O-2020-1, amending Lakewood Municipal Code Title 12 and Article 10 of Title 17 to reflect changes in state and federal law relating to wireless services and communications. Item 12, Ordinance O-2020-2, rezoning land located at 3900 South Wadsworth Boulevard and 3939 South Teller Street, Lakewood CO 80235, County of Jefferson, State of Colorado. Item 13, approving minutes of City Council meetings. City Council meeting July 22nd, 2019. City Council meeting September 9th, 2019. City Council meeting September 23rd, 2019.
Okay, thank you. There has been a request from the applicant on ordinance 0-2020-2 to have that rescheduled for February 24th. So I'll pull that item to general business and council can have that discussion. So with that, Mayor Councilor Abel.
Mayor Paul, I move for approval of council minutes. Order all ordinances introduced on first reading. Should I make an exception for, with the exception of ordinance 0-2020-1. I'm sorry, -2. To be published in the Denver Post with the public hearing set for the date included in each ordinance and for adoption of resolutions, all of which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
No second, I'm sorry. I'm going to probably have to make you do that again.
Okay.
And there are a couple questions, but I forgot to open the public comment portion of that for the two resolutions. Nobody's signed up to speak. Does anybody wish to speak on those resolutions? All right, I'll now close public comment. Do we need to have him reread that whole thing, or can we just do a so moved? Can I have a so moved?
So moved.
So moved.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Councilor Springsteen.
I wanted to ask to pull item 11 regarding the wireless services from the consent agenda for discussion. Would that then be during general business?
Yes, ma'am. So I will, we'll go ahead and pull that. And then Councilor Beta.
I was going to make the same request, so that's all.
Okay. So if the seconder and the motion maker would please take back theirs.
Remove the second.
I withdraw the motion. You sure you want this job, Mr. Skilling? Okay.
So -1 and 2 now. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Paul, I move for approval of the council minutes. Order all ordinances except for ordinance 0-2020-1 and 0-2020-2 to be published in the Denver Post with public hearing set for the date included in the ordinance and for adoption of resolutions, all of which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the two remaining resolutions on the consent agenda. Please cast your votes. And that passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Will the clerk please read item 14?
Item 14, Ordinance O-2019-42, authorizing a supplemental appropriation to the 2020 annual budget in the amount of $66,959 and authorizing the expenditure of grant funds from the Department of Local Affairs to assist the City of Lakewood in partnership with the Jefferson County Complete Count Committee and other subcommittee organizations to work collectively on outreach to hard-to-count populations of Lakewood and Jefferson County to encourage their participation in the 2020 census.
Okay, I'll now open the public hearing on item 14. Nobody's indicated a wish to speak. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. And Councilor Abel, I'll ask for a motion.
Mayor, I move approval of ordinance 0-2019-42.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. Passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Thank you. Ron, Emily, thank you. The clerk, please read item 15.
Item 15, Ordinance O-2019-43, authorizing a real estate exchange agreement with the Regional Transportation District to address land ownership along the RTD Light Rail W line and vacating certain city right-of-way at Quell Street and 13th Avenue.
Okay, I'll now open the public hearing on item 15. Nobody's signed up. Seeing none, I'll close public comment and ask for a motion.
Mayor, I move for acceptance of ordinance 0-2019-43.
Second.
Motion and a second. Councilor Johnson, you have questions or comments?
I do. As I was reading through this proposed ordinance, there's been concern along the deviant bike path from west of Kipling. I believe that's part of this package. I learned today that it does not look like eminent domain will be used. That's my first question, but there is a little bit of portion on one of the pieces of land that it might be. Also, I have a couple of questions. When we exchange all this land, and it looks like this actually was taken place in 2008, the agreement between the city and RTD, we will assume the maintenance and upkeep on the land that we will be getting. It was a little confusing to me that we're already doing it or not, but I just wanted to know if there was a cost that was associated with that. And let's see here. Yeah, I guess that's it for right now, Larry.
Mr. Dorr, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. I beg your pardon for the pause there. I just want to make sure I got all those questions written down so that I could address those. Larry Dorr, City of Lakewood Finance Director and City Treasurer and staff person responsible for the ordinance here tonight. And if I may, just give a little context to the audience here in chambers and perhaps watching at home on this particular ordinance and some of the background. Yes, in 2008, the city entered into an intergovernmental agreement with the Regional Transportation District to provide for many different things happening related to the W line construction that was occurring. Since the time of that intergovernmental agreement, it was believed and envisioned that many property entitlements would probably need to be exchanged at the end of the construction and the opening of the W line. And that proved to be true. The staffs of the City of Lakewood and the Regional Transportation District kept careful watch on all of the different elements that went into it. And as you probably noted in the staff report, there are proposed 90 properties and 72 easements to be a part of all this. And I think everybody's aware that the W line runs about 12 miles just within the city of Lakewood alone. Of course, it runs across Golden, Jefferson County, and Denver all along the way. So it's been a complicated bit of work for staff to track for over 10 years now as this has come to fruition. By the way, I should mention that this transfer of properties agreement has already been approved by the Regional Transportation District's board, and now as a counterparty to this, the City of Lakewood Council and Mayor will need to approve as well. So that's just some of the context that goes in. And we're talking about road crossings over the rail line. We're talking about drainage improvements, all manner of utilities and sound walls, many different things. And I will defer to our City of Lakewood Property and Purchasing Services Division Manager, Adrian Stanchu, if you want to go into any of the particular properties in detail. And I apologize because the staff report was nearly 100 pages. We tried our best to detail every address, every description, every easement, and so forth going in. So let's see. First, there was the question is, does this relate to the extension of the multi-use path, the D10 bike path? And I'm just going to expand on its description because that can get confusing. Yes, it does involve that. There's land that belongs to the RTD that would transfer to the city as a function of this being adopted. The city has been working with those property owners and does not expect to utilize eminent domain, which can only be authorized by this city council. Eminent domain has not been authorized by this city council. Staff does not anticipate it being used. In fact, all of the necessary entitlements for that are under agreement at the moment. So all of those landowners have reached terms and conditions satisfactory to them and satisfactory to the city within our budget to accomplish the multi-use path should this ordinance be approved. So I'm not aware of the need to perform any eminent domain for that one particular element of this ordinance. In terms of cost and maintenance, when RTD, for example, as a function of the requirement of the RTD's construction of the W line, substantial drainage, and there were many other requirements, but the drainage is the most vivid and easily understood for all of us, honestly. The city of Lakewood would have the obligation to maintain those drainage facilities and make sure they're clear of debris and water quality management issues. So the city would have the responsibility to do that, but the city might not have the ease of physical access to perform that maintenance. It may not even have the legal entitlement to approach and maintain those stormwater management facilities as they're in place. But the city staff have been maintaining those since their completion to make sure that the waterways are open, and that would prevent flooding in certain areas that could cause injury or damage not only to RTD but surrounding areas. So we've been performing those since the line opened some number of years ago now. So hopefully that addressed the cost, but the city has generally been performing those, and they wouldn't be materially unusual to our stormwater management utility or other public works maintenance activities. So, Councilor Johnson, I hope that I addressed the idea of cost, whether or not the city's been maintaining it, and then also the concept of eminent domain, I hope.
Thank you, you did, and it leads to another question. There were issues regarding the ditch's headgate. Has that been resolved to the satisfaction of the ditch company? The way the water will now be drained, because when the light rail came in, it disrupted the flow, and I'm not sure that has ever really been satisfactorily taken care of. Is that been addressed with this, with the ditch company?
Thank you. Let me add a little bit of context. And first, may I asterisk these responses by saying, as the city's finance director and city treasurer, I'm not a water engineer, but I've been involved in this for at least the last year since that first came up as an issue. And maybe having a layperson explain it is a good route to go. But the Lakewood Mutual Heights Water Company and the White Lateral Ditch Company are related to one of the 90 properties involved in this ordinance, and that involves the land beneath what we envision becoming the multi-use path there between Kipling and Oak at the end of the day. not involving the city at all, but when the RTD constructed the W line, it made some changes to the way that that ditch works, and then how that impacts the water company, which is downstream. And there was some disagreement and some needs related to that, and that's what's delayed this ordinance coming for many, many months now, as the city's engineers have coordinated with the owner of those property rights, the owners, plural, to ensure that we can meet their needs from an engineering standpoint, and that's been accomplished. So should the city get involved in any future, when the city, I should say, gets involved in the construction of the future multi-use path, those needs will be addressed at that time to satisfy White Lateral and Lakewood Heights Mutual Water Company.
So they will have adequate access to the head gate for clean out, because that seemed to be kind of a
my understanding
sticking
is not
point.
just the access, because they have that today, but just the flow
Right.
of the water, and at the end of the day, it's the pitch
Right.
That's involved that makes the water flow at a certain pace. They still have access to the gates. And they will have that in the future, but it's merely the how steep or how flat
Right.
the flow of the water is moving, and that's the.
And after the bike path is there, they will still have adequate access to that.
Yes, in fact, that won't the multi-use path, the bike path, won't impede their access to the flow of those waters and so forth. They're just immediately to the north.
Right, because you're correct. There's been difficulty with pitch, and the water hasn't been draining correctly. So, thank you, Mr. Dorr.
All right, anything else from Mr. Dorr? Well, while we have this opportunity, I will, on behalf of council, since you're standing here, thank you for all your years of dedicated service. And so the rest of the community may not know, but Mr. Dorr's leaving the city of Lakewood and moving on to a new and exciting chapter of his life. So 22 years here?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. 18 years of service, and thank you for the opportunity to serve each of you and the Lakewood community and this amazing staff of teammates that are behind me. It really means a lot to me to have become the longest serving city treasurer and finance director in Lakewood history. So thank you, and I think that this experience prepares me for my next professional journey. So thank you, and best wishes always.
Best wishes to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job giving your engineering too. Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second on ordinance 2019-42? 43. Please cast your votes. All right, it passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Thank you all very much. The clerk, please read item 16.
Item 16, continued, ordinance O-2019-40, amending chapter 9.80 and section 1.16.080 of the Lakewood Municipal Code, and to add thereto provisions related to rodents and vermin, certain illegal activities constituting a nuisance, and the enforcement of such provisions.
All right, I'll now open the public hearing on item 16 and welcome Chief McCaskey.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I just have a few updates from our last meeting, so thanks for your patience with us on this. We made some changes after the last meeting, and I just wanted to go over those very quickly. I know composting was a big topic of conversation, and we removed the changes that composting could not occur in the front yard or within 10 feet of the property line. That was the removal from that part. The next part on 9.80.170B with criminal activity, we added criminal activity we added multiple offenses to that as well. And then we added, in parentheses F, when such offenses cause a danger to the public health, safety, or welfare. And that was to address some of the concerns that were brought up that night. And then another change we made was under 9.80.170 parentheses M, and that's securing and boarding up buildings. And we changed the language in there. We had language quote, in the opinion of, end quote, and for the code enforcement supervisor or the city's building official. We changed that to determines now. And so that language is consistent with other provisions in the municipal code. So it's not, we took out in the opinion and changed it to determines. There was a suggestion by Councilor Skilling that we add a different section, parentheses, and commercial building language. And so the proposed language which you have now is, whenever a commercial building is abandoned and or vacated, it shall be the owner's responsibility to maintain the building facade and structure, including the removal of all graffiti from the property, and keep the property clear of excessive debris and any dangerous conditions. So Councilor Skilling, I think that was almost verbatim for what we talked about. The only other thing I'd like to just mention is I know I've had some email communication with council members regarding an odor provision, and this is simply a recommendation from our city attorney and our code enforcement that we don't add an odor provision as far as an enforcement option, just because of the difficulty of enforcing something such as that. It doesn't mean that we can't open an investigation or look into complaints of odor, excessive odor, and look for the underlying causes of those. So that's simply a recommendation, and if council feels that that's something that they want, I'll be glad to put it in there. We'll be glad to do that. But I just think, when, from the advice of our legal counsel and from my perspective, it's very difficult to enforce, and I'm not sure that I think that's the best way moving forward. But again, simply a recommendation on our part. So I have with me Sergeant Alish, legal advisor Jenna Roth, and code enforcement supervisor Gail Spencer. So we'll be glad to answer any questions now, and hopefully we've caught all the things and changes that we discussed a couple weeks ago. But
great. Thank you, Chief. Go ahead. We have some public comments, so yeah, thank you. I have, is it Miss Weber? You favor the question? Do you wish to speak? Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else wish to speak on this topic? Seeing, oh, yes, of course, Miss Menton, sorry. And she has a prop, and it's meant as a joke. Ish.
Sarcasm.
Microphone.
All right, Natalie Menton, Ward 5, public or private citizen, I should say. So I appreciate the amendments in the code, especially the compost pile, so that means I don't have to tomorrow morning start digging and moving my 3 very nice compost piles, which the neighbors probably don't know about, but you never know the neighbor that you'll get. But I do note, so I'm sharing with you my thoughts about how it reads right now, and that is that a nuisance is if, basically, I don't have the wording, I don't want to read it here, but if there's vermin. But if you look up vermin, so I gave it to you, which you might note that includes some people, so hopefully I'm not your vermin, that wild animals are believed to be harmful to crops. Well, I can tell you one of the more annoying animals on my property tend to be squirrels, because they like to eat my tomatoes and they like to steal my cucumbers and take one bite and leave it out in the driveway. Now, if you want to make this, everybody get one? Did you? Okay, good. I want to make sure everybody's got one. This is a squirrel eating a pumpkin. And as I'm saying here, ban the wildlife, save the town. Carved pumpkins already went through enough torture without the horror of squirrel teeth. And you'll see the squirrel there at the bottom eating the tomatoes. And if you were to read this code literally, it would mean that there is a squirrel eating that pumpkin from Halloween. You could be in violation of the law. So I just want to bring it to your attention that yes, we are supposed to trust. Nobody will bring you in, nobody will ticket you, nobody will complain. Well, I don't think any of you would want to bet money on that. So I just bring it to your attention. I am glad that the 3 violations at least are saying public health welfare, but honestly, a cracked sidewalk is a health issue. I can tell you about that with 16th Street Mall downtown. There's just things that can be pushed, and we should be very, very careful when we create codes that neighbors can use against one another, and creates problems and takes police and code enforcement away from the really important things. That's it. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this.
Anybody else wish to speak? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment. And there's some questions, so I'll start with Councilor Franks.
Paul, it was just a comment. I wanted to thank you guys for being so open and willing to hear, especially about the compost. I mean, I work with compost groups. They were so thankful that you guys were so willing to consider that, remove that. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that. I think that this is collaborative, and I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Franks.
So I have Councilor Harrison, Councilor Abel, Councilor Beta, Councilor Johnson, Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you, Mayor. Hallelujah! I'm so excited about this that we've been waiting for this for a really long time. I just have one quick question. Now, I wanted to go back to the comment about odor. So odor itself is not in our code, but if the neighbors are smelled, because that's kind of what started our infamous house on South Lee Street. I won't call it what we normally call it, but it was the odor. So the underlying cause of the odor would give you the right to be able to go and investigate, correct?
That's correct, Councilor. If there is an odor reported, we can investigate based on what's provided to us.
And the assumption would be the odor would come from something that isn't exactly acceptable.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you very much, and thank you for all your work. Let me tell you, this will make Ward 5 people very happy. Thank you.
Councilor Abel.
I think you've done a very succinct and responsive job. I like being able to get something across with a sparsity of words, and y'all did a very good job of that. And it was very responsive. As for the odor's a difficult thing, and I understand the odor detectors are quite expensive. So I think just being able to respond to the odor should cover that well. And if there are questions about what we meant, whether it meant to be we wanted cracks in the sidewalk prosecuted as public safety risks, I think people can just refer to our videos. We now keep our meeting videos forever. So if there's any question, folks can just dial back to what we said a few weeks ago and pick up what we're really looking for. You did a great job, folks. Thank you.
Councilor Beta.
I just want to thank you for your responsiveness to our concerns, especially on the zoning issues. So appreciate it. I think it's what we needed to address. It gives the courts a little bit of wiggle room to deal with these things, and that's what I was looking for. The other thing I just wanted to mention, as a private attorney, I've dealt with these kinds of issues before on both sides, and you've got a great tool there that I hope you'll take advantage of when you need to, and that is the provision. I think it's 9.80.090, which is the costs and charges. I think that's a really effective tool. It allows you to go in and really fix the problem. If you've got somebody that hasn't complied and you've had a number of contacts with them and they still got a yard that's, really a junkyard, let's say, and not meeting all the requirements, you can go in there and clean it up and make them pay for it. And if they don't pay for it, lien their house. And that lien is a priority lien. That's probably more effective than just removing them from the house. You still haven't, by doing that, you still haven't corrected the real problem. So I just point that out, and that's been in the code right along, but just in terms of your enforcement, I think that's a really effective tool. So good luck. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Councilor. And I know we have abated some properties. We just did some last week in some different wards, and it's definitely an effective tool. So, and my commitment to you, sir, and the rest of the mayor and council is, we can always revisit if we find some new problem or issue that arises, we can always come back and address it. And we can't foresee everything that occurs, but we're open to that. So thank you.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. I obviously support this, and you know how much I admire and respect you, Chief and Sergeant Alish. Thank you for your work on this. I do have a few questions just for my own sake, so that I feel like I think I've maybe misread some things, because Councilman Beta may have answered one of them. On page 436 at the top, under D, and it's 436 of our packet. Okay, this is under 9.80.170, declared nuisances. We've got their interior of the structure. It is unlawful and constitutes a nuisance for any person to allow junk or rubbish to accumulate inside a residence or other structure to the extent it is a health and safety hazard to the occupants or the public. As a visiting nurse, I know what hoarding looks like. My only concern is that when we codify this, we perhaps put some people in a position where they need to report a condition, number one. And number two, you know, I don't want to live like that, but it just is a little awkward to know that there's this kind of language where somebody could maybe come in, and how do you enforce it if it's codified? Just talk to me, help me through this one.
Sure, Councilor. So that is existing language that was already in the ordinance. So that has not something that we've changed. I know of one particular property in Ward 5, I believe it is, where it's a hoarding property, and it's so extensive that the hoarding that the occupant can't live in the home anymore. And it's a home that the fire department has standing orders that they refuse to go into the home if there's a structure fire due to the danger. So that's the one example I can give. I don't think there's any mandatory state law requirements of mandatory reporting for hoarding homes like that. So I'm not sure who would report that, but you know, the one house that I know of that we've seen, it has impacted the neighbors, and you know, and the hoarding is actually extended out into the yard, so the yard's unkept, and it's drawing, attracting skunks and other type of vermin. So, you know, we didn't change that, but it's they're pretty severe cases.
Usually, as a visiting nurse, when you go to a home and it's very, very cluttered on the outside, that's exactly what it's going to be like on the inside. And so I understand what that looks like. I just want to make sure that people aren't put in a position where, you know, maybe they should have to feel like they have to report something. And okay, next thing. Page 450 of the packet. I know it gets confusing here. Under 9.80.170, under B, under criminal activity, we've got the unlawful manufacture of let me find it here. Yeah, the unlawful manufacture, cultivation, growth, production, processing, sale of controlled substances. There's more to it than that. Oftentimes, and I don't want to beat a dead horse to death here, but oftentimes the only way that neighbors know that there is marijuana being grown illegal is because the odor is so strong. But yet, talk to me. Just help me through this, Chief. I mean, how do you enforce it when you don't really?
Those are difficult cases because we have had complaints about that before.
Right.
A lot of times it requires a lot of investigation on our part. One thing we can do is we call it knock and talk. We can knock on the door and talk to the residents that live there and see if they'll give us consent to search or and they may or may not. That's one option. We have other options, search warrants if there's enough probable cause. We can search. We can obtain a search warrant. Depending on what information we have. Again, a lot of times it's limited, and we don't have enough to obtain a search warrant. But we can look at Excel energy bills. We can look at the patterns of. We can do surveillance. We can do a lot of different things like that. But those are very difficult cases. But generally, I think, and when you have such a strong smell of marijuana, that odor. Generally, there's, it's not one or two plants. It's
exactly.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of different tools we can use, but those are difficult, very difficult cases for us.
Well, I know you're very thoughtful about it because there was one issue not that far from my home, and you were very careful the way you proceeded. So I know that you're doing your due diligence, but I'm just saying that sometimes the only thing maybe that the neighbors know is an ordinance. Or an odor, so you can use that as probable cause. And
we have to have more than just the odor. There has to be some other factors, and our detectives will kind of try to put together and establish some information that would lead to probable cause for a search warrant.
Okay.
But the odor itself generally is not enough to establish probable cause that some type of illegal grow is happening at the residence.
Okay. Let's see here. I'm not finding it right now. I've got on page 452. There's language in here about approaching or I believe that it's language that it sounds like if the house is in such bad shape that you disallow the owner from getting within 200 yards. Talk to me a little bit about that, because as a homeowner, it's under B and it's redlined 1.16.080.
You want to talk?
Just tell me a little bit about what you're meaning here so that I'm not reading it wrong.
Yeah, that and the other one. So, Counselor, there's two examples I can give you in two different wards where this applies. And the concept is this, that when you have something where you have a nuisance property that's dangerous to the health and safety of the public, where either, like the example the chief gave earlier, where you have a house that's hoarded to the point where he or she has hoarded herself out of the home and has now begun hoarding in the yard. The problem is oftentimes our building officials can post the building as unsafe, but we have no way to control their access to the property. And so then it makes it very difficult to enforce anything as far as behavior, because when our officers are told, hey, go by the property and make sure no one's going into that unsafe building, if the person's standing on the driveway, there's nothing we can do. They're literally, we have to wave at them and keep driving. So the ability to ensure that there's that safety piece and you're able to effectively contain them from going into the home is difficult with that. The second example I'll give is there was a home where there was meth use, there was prostitutes going in and out of it. We had a robbery suspect flee to that location. They had broken their own sewer line and dug down 20 feet to get to it in their own front yard and had raw sewage going everywhere. In that case, we boarded up the building because it was declared unsafe, and they broke back in. We boarded it again. Eventually, they broke through the chimney and crawled down into their own home. And so and the problem there was we kept boarding the building saying, this is unsafe. You cannot be in here. It's for your safety and everyone else's. The floor is unstable. The foundation is unstable. There's exposed wiring. When I first went in there, they had bypassed the safety on the furnace and it was running nonstop, just pouring out water, and there was inadequate ventilation for the gas line. So we shut down the entire house and had to have the fire department come in. Needless to say, in these very extreme cases, when we boarded up the house, we would tell our officers, hey, please drive by there and make sure that the building's secure. The problem is there was nothing preventing those homeowners from standing in the yard all night. And so the neighbors would call and say, hey, they started a fire in the backyard to stay warm. They just put up a tent. We had them put RVs on the property. They were sleeping in cars. But we had no way to say, hey, we know you're doing this. And we also have the resources to surveil this kind of the place nonstop. So the goal with this was identify those cases where we've gone to this extreme and provide a measure to say, you can't be around here because you continue to cause problems for your entire neighborhood based on your activity. So those are kind of examples of where we would use that.
Perfect. I just needed to be talked through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you. I also wanted to thank you so much for the way you addressed all the questions and concerns that our council had, but also just the incredible way you've helped craft this all of these changes. I think it's going to really help us address some of these extreme trouble properties that not a large number, but the ones that we do have do really create a lot of upset and unpleasant and sometimes just very unsafe situations for the community. So thank you so much. And they tend to be very difficult and challenging issues. So we just really appreciate everything that you've done. And then also just for fun, Miss Menton, I rarely think rat jokes are funny at this point, but I did really enjoy your vermin joke. So thank you. And I will obviously be supporting this. So thanks.
I just echo all of that, Ms. Roth, Ms. Spencer, Sergeant Chief, thanks for everything. You know, I can remember back to when we had the first community meeting, and you don't always anticipate these types of issues, right? And it was so severe, and it was just something that we'd never seen before. And so sometimes government can be slow to react, but I think in this thoughtful approach that we've done, and it's taken quite a long time, but you always have to balance the property rights of our residents and their individual rights with the public safety of the rest. So I think this is a great balance. I certainly support it. I know you've put a lot of time and energy, and Sergeant, we've always enjoyed your presentations too. I know you get a kick out of that. So with that, I'll ask Councilor Abel for a motion, please.
Mayor, I move for approval. I move for approval of ordinance O-2019-40.
Second.
All right, there is a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And that passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Woohoo. Congratulations. Thank you. Okay, we'll now go to general business, and I'll ask the clerk to please reread item 11.
Item 11, Ordinance O-2020-1, amending Lakewood Municipal Code Title 12 and Article 10 of Title 17 to reflect changes in state and federal law relating to wireless services and communications.
Councilor Springsteen and Beta had requested to pull this. Councilor Springsteen.
I think this is an important issue. It's one that has been brought up by many, many of my constituents. And, you know, certainly there are health concerns, and we understand what you're saying regarding federal law and what we are and are not permitted to do with regard to the FCC and federal law. However, this is a bit of a moving target, and there are changes that have occurred in the law. There's a recent U.S. Court of Appeals case that came down a against the FCC in an order that the FCC made, sort of excusing wireless carriers from doing environmental effect studies under NEPA. And what the court said was that the FCC could not forego that requirement, and that the wireless companies have to do those NEPA studies. And there are also issues with what is the wave of the future. So fiber optics is something some people consider the wave of the future, and wonder if 5G might be obsolete within a few years. And so it's a question I have about if we're gonna make changes to the ordinance. From what I could tell, that in some cases added language that would make it easier for wireless companies to put some of these things in place without having some kind of public discussion about it. I think it is not being responsible as a council. And so I would really like to take this issue off the agenda and at the very least have a study session about it. And one of the things I would point out is it was set for hearing on the 27th of January when we have a pretty important agenda issue to decide. And so I think there again, at the very least, this deserves some discussion and the public weighing in on this. And so I would just ask that we as a council don't get ahead of ourselves with the changes in this ordinance. I did have a question. So I haven't been here very long, so I don't know how this particular item came to a first reading and who brought it here and why. The memo did say something about there were meetings with with some of the wireless carriers, but I guess I'm wondering what about meetings with constituents who are concerned about this issue as well. And I personally had a couple of experiences in trying to deal with this issue when they were when Verizon was installing a cell tower just about 20 feet from my kids' school playground. And there were city ordinance rules at play that it looks like have been taken off of the ordinance here. And so that concerns me, because that was one of the very few things we could do under the federal law, were these aesthetic sort of barriers and protections. And so I just think that we should at least consider this issue a little further.
Mr. Goldstein, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. Well, first off, for the public hearing on the 27th, we have consulted with Ken Fellman and his firm, and he will be giving a much more extensive presentation with a lot more background than I'm able to do here. We have worked with the wireless providers on trying to thread the needle. Municipalities, Lakewood and every other municipality, are largely preempted by federal and state law on this issue. So we have very limited room to maneuver here. And in our ongoing discussions with the wireless providers, we've tried to thread that needle and and regain as much control for our residents and for the city as possible, as much as possible. But again, as was said in the memo, this is largely an issue of federal control, and Mr. Fellman will certainly be speaking more to that on the 27th.
Okay. Councilor Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. Appreciate that. I certainly wanted to weigh in. We certainly have been hearing from a lot of constituents. I sent a report to all of council. While I am obviously very open to hearing all kinds of information, I certainly approach this with some level of pause. While I would be supportive of getting to that point, it may be that night that we decide that we put I do need more information. Over the weekend, I found the court case. I conferred with a fellow council member. We didn't have time to research that, but certainly there's some merging law that, and that may, be taken farther up. But I think at this point, getting more information, but certainly I just want to kind of notice out to my colleagues that I may be in support of a deeper study on that, depending on what comes out of not only that information that we'll get from Mr. Feldman, but also our own due diligence as we kind of reach out into the research space that we can find as well.
Councilor Abel?
I would echo that. There are a lot of concerns about radio frequency emission, a lot of anecdotal evidence, and I think that needs to be discussed. But I also, CenturyLink is providing 5G as well, and they're doing it through fiber optics and existing cables on overhead. And we're told that we have to let these folks have poles, short poles every 50 feet, 75 feet. I know 5G varies in its power and coverage. So are we required to allow them to make incursions into our right-of-way, or are we simply required to allow them to offer 5G service, which could be done with different delivery systems? It might be less unattractive. So that's one of the questions I would have, and I'd like to see a full discussion of this on the and I have the same concern about the 27th. We're going to have a lot to talk about that night. I guess we could bring our own cots and breakfast the next morning, but I think we might be able to accommodate a more wide-ranging discussion of 5G on perhaps a different date.
Councilor Beda?
Thank you, Mayor. I would echo those comments from my other co-councilors, and I would add that this is fairly complicated stuff, and we have approximately 20 pages of new text in this amended ordinance, and frankly, it's complicated. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't understand quite a bit of it, and I'm going to have to go through it again probably several times to try and understand it, and I suspect maybe there's others that might have some difficulty understanding it as well. And the thing is, Mr. Goldstein had a really good point I was glad to hear, is that what we're trying to do here is maximize our control, to the extent we can under federal law, and also to protect the interests of our city. And I'm glad to hear that, because that's one of my biggest concerns. Are we doing everything we can within the limits and bounds of the law? And so I'd like a little more information on that at some point. What are the specifics? What are we talking about in terms of what we're doing to try and, protect our residents in our city on those kinds of issues? So it's complicated. There's a lot here. I'm sort of surprised to see that we've gotten along all these years without these 20 pages of additions, and I probably need some explanation about that as well. So I could see this being a somewhat, involved discussion. And I think that's why I supported taking it off of the first reading. And I think we should consider maybe putting it at a time when we have more time and we don't have a real crowded agenda. So that's my comments.
If I may just speak briefly to that. We have had provisions in our code that govern wireless cell towers, similar to the one that Councilmember Springsteen was speaking of that was placed near school. Those are different rules than what govern 5G or micro towers. And as the industry has changed and as this technology has evolved, the FCC has come out with different rules. The state also has rules pertaining to this. So we're trying to have our code catch up to that. We are a little behind the game. The FCC required municipalities to have started this work already. They really wanted cities to have already adopted this. I think we're in line with where many of our peer cities are, but further delay to this might not be the best thing because we're already kind of on the edge of compliance with the FCC rule. I understand that the 27th is a tight meeting. Many of our agendas are heavy agendas that just seems to be the nature of it right now. I do think you'll learn a lot from Mr. Feldman's presentation. It is available on Lakewood Speaks right now, I believe, for those of you who are interested in watching it. At least the slideshow, you don't have Ken's smiley face there, but I think you'll still learn a lot from that. So I encourage you to take a look at that in the meantime, and hopefully we can still address this on the 27th.
So two quick things. We do have a request. The next item that was pulled was to remove the rezone from the 27th. So that would free up some time. The second opportunity, I guess, could be to have that presentation with Mr. Fellman and then extend this second reading further down. So then there's that opportunity. Again, I appreciate you mentioned it's on Lakewood Speaks. And that could be an opportunity as well to postpone or to move this more to a presentation on the 27th with continued second reading into February as well.
I think our challenge right now is we are currently receiving applications for sites and we're processing them. We don't have the benefit of the additional provisions that we have in the new rules. So we're perpetually trying to keep up with the industry on this, but we don't have the benefit of our new rules. So I think from a staff perspective, as quickly as we can get these rules in place, and I understand that there's concerns in the community about it, from a staff perspective, we have the same concerns. We're pretty hamstrung. So the rules at least give us a little more authority than we have now.
Thank you. Councilor LeBear.
Well, I was just going to echo a lot of the comments that I've already heard, and also I was just going to ask if there was sort of a hard deadline of when we need to get something through, but you've kind of answered that a little bit, I think, with saying that you think these additional regulations would be helpful. I was also just going to mention that I sit on the NLC committee that does the federal regulations on 5G networks, and we have a ton of resources with them, and I think we could benefit from reaching out to them and having them provide all that information that they have on all the different rule changes, and they're constantly talking about this. And I know at all the NLC meetings and CML meetings, they've talked about this issue pretty frequently because of all the different federal rules, the FAST Act, and all the different things that are happening right now to try to speed up and ramp up 5G deployment. But I did want to just agree with everyone. I do think there's a lot of concern in the community about this. I've probably had more emails on this than just about anything, except for maybe rockets and development, maybe. So I think there's obviously some concern, and I think we probably missed an opportunity to do more education for council, but also for the community as well about what some of these things mean. So maybe we need to look at that process again, but just want to kind of echo what everyone else has said. So thanks.
We can certainly look at putting some additional material online. even now. One correction, the Ken Fellman's presentation won't be up until the 17th, 10 days prior to the 27th. I know he was doing it and came in to record the audio or voiceover for it, but it won't be up until this Friday.
So procedurally, though, I mean, I know we're talking the 27th, but the next regular meeting is the 10th. So you have basically 2 weeks out from that, if that would be something that is amenable as well. So we still have a bunch of lights on. Let me try to get through. Councilor Gutwein, you turned off. Councilor Harrison?
Thank you. I struggle with this as well. It's not that we're getting emails, it's that I'm not sure I really understand 5G yet. So I really do need some help with that. So I'm really thrilled that we're going to have that. But I'd also really encourage all of us, when we listen to the presentation ahead of time, get our questions to staff ahead of time so that when we come to the meeting, we come prepared and not necessarily have, a whole list of questions. Certainly, things are going to come up during the dialogue, but that will really help our schedule as well. So please, please, please do that. Thank you.
Councilor Springsteen?
I've talked to people in other municipalities about this issue, and they have done any number of things, like hiring an expert esthetician to come in and suggest rules, how to kind of make this issue a little more citizen friendly. And I think that's always the issue for me, is why are we need to support the citizens on this as well as the businesses. And so one question I have is, why are we having this this information session from only one side? I want to hear from both sides. And so we see this again and again. I want to hear what the issues are on both sides. I think it is premature to have an information session, especially on the 27th, when we have a hard deadline on 200 with the allocations that night, and we don't have an agreement on how to handle that yet. And so I think that needs to, at certain times, we need to really focus on what is the biggest priority in front of us. And for that night, that is certainly the priority. And I think delaying this another 2 weeks when it just suddenly showed up on the agenda today, and I'd like to ask, who did the drafting of the text to change this ordinance? Who did all of this drafting, and why was it just presented to us at this point in one big block without us being able to weigh in as we go and how to approach this? And I understand there's federal rules and SEC rules, but that doesn't mean that they're going to come down on us in the next month or two or even year about this. I mean, they just want us to come up with a way to help them comply. And so I understand you're getting applications for sites, but those applications are just going to have to wait until we hear the citizens on this issue. And we can't do it on the 27th. I really, really strongly suggest that we have a more complete look at this on a different date, whether that be February 10th or a date further down the road.
Councilor Abel?
Ms. Springsteen brings up a really good point. What are they going to do? Shut us down? But that's a serious question. how is the federal government going to enforce sanction against the city if we delay a little bit?
That might be a question for our city attorney, but I think in all practical purposes, what's going to happen is we're going to end up approving permits for locations without the benefit of the new rules in place. It already happened. AT&T put in a master lease agreement a month or so ago, a couple months ago, and we didn't have the benefit of our new rules. We're trying to catch up by making some adjustments in here, so it's happening real time right now. And we can't just not approve them. There's a shot clock associated with the federal rules that requires us to approve them. If we don't, they're automatically approved.
Well, they can't put anything in our right-of-way automatically approved or not. Isn't that correct? Can they just go out and start digging up the right-of-way and planting these poles?
I'm not sure, Counselor. I do know that the shot clock concept has been used by the FCC in a number of scenarios over the years. I don't know how often they've had to implement that sort of automatic approval, but I know it's a tool that they've used to hold the sword over the heads of local governments. I'm confident Mr. Fellman knows what the likely enforcement mechanisms are, and I'd be happy to get in touch with him and pass along what I learned from him, as soon as I learn about it, long before the next meeting, so you can have that information. And I would just add, I understand perfectly Councilor Springsteen's desire to have both sides represented. I just want to make clear that Mr. Fellman is not a side. He's not an industry representative. He's a municipal lawyer with expertise in telecommunications who consults with a number of local jurisdictions and is a recognized national authority, but not as an industry representative. He really represents the interests of municipalities and assists them with getting their ordinances up to speed. So I just want to make sure everybody was aware of that.
I believe you were at the county when meetings went on for 12 hours once a week for about 3 months on the towers on Lookout Mountain and the effects of RFE, and there was no concurrence from anyone on those issues, and they debated it for quite some time. I think it's a serious concern to a number of members of our community, and I don't want to rush into something like that. Thank you.
So I'm getting a sense that there's definitely a need for more information and that folks don't want to tackle it on the 27th. So potentially we could still have the presentation come out on the 17th, which would be on Lakewood Speaks. And we could postpone second reading till February 10th, which would then provide the opportunity for the full presentation, for public comment, for all the members on council to reach out to whoever they'd like to have questions presented. And then at that point, if council doesn't feel comfortable passing that on second reading on the 10th, then we have that opportunity. What I do hear is ambiguities, which we see a lot of times with the federal government, which is unfortunate. But we also hear that these are actually more prescriptive than what we have now going forward. And so there could be better benefits to the community with the passage of this. Right now, we don't have that benefit. So there is some urgency. And so if council would suffice to move this to February 10th for second and final reading with the presentation and the opportunity now to have over a month to try to get information, if that would be acceptable. Okay, so
I do not know if Mr. Fellman is available on the 10th.
Okay. So we will have his presentation available on the 17th, and we will, at this point, I think the best thing we can do is encourage or try to see if he is available on the 10th. But we have to have some actionable item tonight because we're posting for the second hearing. And so we could change it on the 27th if he's not available. I mean, not move it back to the 27th, but we would know by the 27th, which is our next regular meeting, if we need to then extend second reading from the 10th. Counselor.
So we're at first reading tonight, and normally would be scheduling this for second reading. It's unusual to deal with first reading scheduling. Normally you have this event and you pick your public hearing date and off you go. But depending on Mr. Fellman's availability, we could probably continue first reading until the 27th and have the second reading set, or pass it tonight on first reading with the 10th as the second reading date. It doesn't have to be the following meeting. Obviously, there are benefits to having dealt with it sooner. But if you want to do pass the matter on first reading and set the second reading date for the 10th, that would be probably the easiest way to get it on that date.
I misspoke. I'm sorry. Does council follow that? So the way I was describing it was moving second reading all of a sudden to the 10th. We still need to extend first reading, which would be extended to the 27th, with setting the public hearing for February 10th.
Well, I do think the alternative could be to pass it on first reading tonight, but change the date of the second reading to the 10th, which is same action that would have been taken on the consent agenda. It's just the date of second reading is 2 weeks later.
And if there is an extension that's needed upon second reading on the 10th, that can still take place.
It can still happen.
So we would accept this on first reading, which doesn't mean we approve anything, which doesn't mean it changes those other processes, but then it would be, that's probably the cleanest action forward. Okay. Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you. I just want to kind of add that when Mr. Feldman is giving a presentation, if it can be, does it include like basic education of 5G?
I think he'll do a 5G 101.
5G 101. Okay, great. And then
I can ask him to.
I think that would be great if you could
upon
ask him to expand on based on the number of questions we're having up here. And then also just so that it's really clear for all of us and for the community whether these changes are making it easier or harder for the towers to come in, and what those changes specifically are, and what control we specifically retain, because it sounds like those are kind of some of the key questions. And that is all. Thank you.
Councilor Springsteen.
Well, I was just wondering again about whether we could have a study session on this issue. I mean, if it goes to second reading, I guess I don't really understand what that means. And can we have a study session along the way?
So it's certainly the council's prerogative. As you know, we have a pretty packed agenda going forward, so we'll have to look at what other things we would need to move. The idea with postponing would be giving council a month and the community a month with another opportunity on the 27th, because this wouldn't be on the agenda on the 27th, for public comment, to then have the presentation and have all of our questions provided to Mr. Fellman sooner than the 10th. And the 10th, we can address all those. And if those are addressed, then if it's council's prerogative to move forward with a vote, that would be yes. If not, then we wouldn't. But as you know, our agendas are pretty packed going forward, and we have a retreat coming up. So it's council's prerogative. I think you would like to have an opportunity to have more information, and I think this month leeway gives us that opportunity to come back and have that discussion on the 10th. And then if that's not enough information for council on the 10th, then that would be a no vote. But I am hearing there are some things that are timely that can benefit the city as well.
Well, I guess I would push for a study session on this issue, because I think just a presentation is not going to be enough information and not enough opportunity for the public to weigh in on the issue. So
And to that point, we will have the presentation ready on January 17th for all of the community, as well as a comment page and question page for the community to weigh in on that for weeks in advance of the 10th.
Okay.
Is that accurate? That'll be, it posts on the 17th, and so Lakewood Speaks is the opportunity for people to watch the same presentation and ask all the questions that they might have. Mr.
With the
Goldstein?
delay to the 10th, we might not normally post it that early in advance, but it's already.
If it's ready,
we prepared. We'll go ahead and post it.
Okay.
Councilor Vincent?
Yes, because I think we had talked at a meeting too that as counselors, we were going to go out to Lakewood Speaks and read those comments and then bring them back saying we had 54, 30 against. So those people would be acknowledged rather than having to have them come to the meeting. I think also too, if we do this gives at least, I'll speak for Ward 2, we'll have probably 8 to 10 meetings in between that time, which I feel then it'll be our responsibility to go back to our constituents and say, go out there, write to us, or come to the meeting. And that'll give us plenty of time to ask questions to Mr. Felton.
Councilor Springsteen? Your pleasure.
So am I supposed to make a motion or?
We can, I just want to get a feel for what you're comfortable with, and then we can guide you on that motion if you already know what you'd like.
Okay. Well, I just, I don't know. I feel like this whole thing has moved very fast and there's a lot of ambiguity to it. And so moving on to where we would actually be taking a vote on the 10th just feels premature to me. And I would love to see a study session on this issue. I think it's a big issue that affects a lot of people, and I'm still not hearing how the applications for sites, why we have to keep processing them unless, and I heard something about a shot clock, but that's, I'm understanding something the FCC forces, but has done only sporadically. So I'm not really understanding. I just think from a counselor's perspective, we need to understand why this is something on our agenda suddenly and why it has to be passed immediately. And so I just think we need a little more information leading up to that. But at this point, you know, I think that's my idea, is to have a study session on the issue. Okay. So.
And just for clarification, when did this appear? So we have quite a ramp up as far as our schedule goes that Ms. Millard sends out. So I don't think it just appeared.
Are you asking when this agenda was published?
Yeah.
10 days ago.
Okay. And then prior with how long has this been on the queue? Like, we get a weekly update that has the different, like this?
Been several months. I don't know exactly when we decided which meeting it would be on, but I would say several months.
Okay. So, Councilor Harrison?
Just a clarification to Councilor Springsteen. I think the presentation potentially may be able to yield what you're hoping for. We'll still be able to have public comment, so those people that have a strong opinion would be able to do that. We as counselors would still be able to ask questions. Even if we did a workshop, the give and take I think you're looking for from the people that are presenting and us probably is a little bit more stilted. I think maybe what you're thinking about is maybe a roundtable discussion where everybody asks lots of questions. And right now we don't have that in our arsenal. A workshop or the presentation will still give the public the right to be able to come and testify. We would still have the right to ask those questions. So I think to be able to get the information out there, I think this will still do what you want to do. And then with a long lead-in time, that will also give, and I'd encourage all of us, and me too, to try to understand what 5G is and how it works and why it's good and why it's bad ahead of time, so that we're ready with that night's presentation. So I think it's still going to do what you want to do.
Because it affords itself really an extra public hearing or an extra public comment session on the 17th that it wouldn't have afforded itself. So there will now essentially be 2 public comment opportunities, the 17th, or I'm sorry, the 27th and the 10th, to speak on it. And again, if the presentation doesn't answer council's questions, then there's an opportunity for a continuance. So, but again, it's up to you if you want to make a motion for a study session. We just want to get the clarifying motion because we had this posted, so what that would look like, or if we want to do it to us, then we would just, if not, then I'd ask Councilor Abel just to make a motion that would take this to second reading on the 2nd, or on the February 10th, with all those other things in place.
I guess I would make a motion for a study session on this issue.
Okay, so 1 second. What would we need for, because this is posted, what would a legal motion need to be?
Well, I think since the action contemplated tonight was the passage on first reading, if you were to do the delayed second reading that we've talked about, that would be a simple motion of
correct. That would
passed on second reading with the new date of February 10th and not the date of 1/27 that was listed in the packet. If you're going to do something different along the lines of schedule a study session, well, it's supposed to be going to second reading, so first, it's going to depend on the timing. When would that study session be held? Do we have a date that's available, or are we looking to postpone indefinitely until we can find a date? Obviously, that's problematic. But if we were to know what date that would happen, then it would be to continue first reading, perhaps, until a date certain, with a study session to be scheduled on X date as well. That's what I'm thinking we would do to fit that in.
And that, looking quick glance, that'd put us at least into March.
Well, there is a study session on February 3rd, but it's Metro District.
Metro districts, yeah.
That would be likely a heavy night.
While you look, there's still some folks on my board, so Councilor Franks, then Councilor Gutwein.
I guess I'm just trying to clarify. I don't know how we don't lose any avenue forward by sticking with a schedule that puts us on the 10th. If we're not comfortable, then we pull it and do anything. My preference is that we get the extended, we get the presentation on the 17th, on the 27th, public comment can come. On the 10th, we get all of that additional information, YouTube video, there's plenty of places to get education. We come to the 10th, we're not comfortable, we still have that avenue to pull it. That's what I'm going to be supporting. I just think it's the cleanest way to move forward, and that's the direction I'd like to go. Thanks.
Councilor Gutwein.
I agree with Councilor Franks, and I think we do also have to be mindful of the large number of other issues. Just for example, the Metro District is one that has been very important to our community for a very long time, and that will be a big issue. And maybe I'm a square, but I feel a little less comfortable about being out of compliance with federal and state law. So I would like to make sure we continue to move forward through this process.
Councilor Skilling.
Just concur with Councilor Franks.
Councilor LeBaire.
I also wanted to concur with Councilor Franks and just mention that still on the 10th, we still have the opportunity to say then, hey, we don't have enough information, or it wasn't prevalent enough to the issues, and let's have a study session now. So I think we still have that option.
Councilor Vincent.
Just perhaps so we don't have to go any further, I agree with Councilor Franks too, so it sounds almost like we have the votes to go ahead and continue with first and second.
So I certainly want to be sensitive to the concerns, and I think that this is a nice roadmap forward, if that's okay. And we'll just see. It'll be a learning lesson for all of us. But I think the key that's going to be really important is to get those folks who are concerned engaged prior to, the 27th. So on the 17th, have that opportunity, whether we have email blasts or reaching out to our constituents, that this is now out there. If you want to come and talk on the 27th, you can. So with that, I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Abel?
I have two of the elements covered. I move we advance ordinance 0-2020-1 on first reading with public hearings set on February 10th and presentation on January 27th. I mean, do I need to work in the 27th at all into this motion?
I don't think so, except that I was going to suggest, just because of what's been published tonight, that when you say we pass this on first reading with second reading to be held on February 10th, as you said, and not on January 27th as identified in the packet, so that it's clear that date has changed. But there's nothing else happening on the 27th.
Other than public comment.
Other than public
General
comment.
Public comment.
Yes.
We don't pass anything on first reading. We move them along. So again, I move that we advance ordinance O-2020-1 on first reading with public hearing set for February 10th.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Please cast your votes. All right, that passes 10 ayes, 1 nay. The nay being Councilor Springsteen. Thank you all for that discussion and the sensitivities to the issue in the community. Okay, will the clerk please read item 12 into the 12? Ordinance, yeah, thank you.
Item 12, ordinance O-2020-2, rezoning land located at 3900 South Wadsworth Boulevard and 3939 South Teller Street, Lakewood, Colorado, 80235, County of Jefferson, State of Colorado.
So there was a request made by the applicant to pull this off the 27th agenda and move this until February 24th.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
So that would be public hearing.
Yes, it's kind of the same as what we just did, because we're passing it on first reading or advancing it on first reading, but to a different date than what was published.
Okay. Mayor Paul, I move that we advance ordinance O-2020-2 for public hearing on February 24th.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. So that passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Okay, we're to general business, and there was a city council item agenda request from Councilor Harrison that wants to get all kinds of people fired up, so have at it.
This is too much fun. Actually, when I sent this in, well, we won't go there. I had received a couple of emails about our goose problem in the city of Lakewood, indicating that they're delightful sometimes, but they are really a messy animal, and suggested that the city of Lakewood consider some sort of a remediation program similar to what Denver has. Now, I know that that's going to bring another night where we're here until 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'm not sure that I really want to do that. But I wanted the constituent that asked me to bring it forward. I'm bringing it forward, and we can talk about if that's something that council would like to even consider. I'll do more research, but I wanted to see if we even had a temperament to consider it. So,
thank you, Councilor LeBaire.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess first and foremost, I think, and I don't know if Councilor Harrison, if you already asked the staff, but I guess my first question is, do we already have some sort of remediation program, some sort of program to help mitigate geese issues? Because if we do, then good, maybe we should just get an overview of what that is and what that looks like. If we don't, then, I'm certainly okay with opening the door to looking at what we could do differently to help with, the geese issue. I will say first and foremost, I don't support capturing and euthanizing geese. And I would also add just quickly that Denver has a very extensive program, and what got press was the euthanization, but they've had an extensive program for years. They oil 3,000 geese eggs a year. That keeps them from turning into geese. It essentially kills the eggs. They have a whole 26-page document on their website about how they have their goose management program, and they do all sorts of stuff. They drive golf carts around, scaring them. They use laser lights. They make noises. They grow the grass around ponds so that way they don't want to go. They don't want to stay there because it's hard for them to get into the water and out of the water. So there's a whole host of things that hopefully we're already doing some of those things, and that might help appease some of the constituents, because I know I've heard that issue as well. But I just kind of wanted to preface it with that, and maybe we can get some more information. That'd be my first thought.
I think more information is exactly what I'd like to do at this point, especially seeing some of the facial expressions that I said, around the room here. So I'll take this as my homework assignment, and we're not going to be issuing licenses at this point. So we'll just call it good. Okay, thank you.
And I had a sidebar with Mr. Ash from our LAC, and it sounds like there is some one member in particular that did a lot of research on this prior, because they had looked at maybe bringing this up as a council issue. So that could also be a resource. Councilor Abel?
Would that mean that we no longer get to look at the little cardboard cutouts of coyotes?
Whatever you decide, Charlie.
Thank you.
Councilor Bita?
I think the idea maybe is get more information, and particularly I'd like to know what our Parks Department is doing on this, what if they feel they need any council action, or if they've got enough tools on their own to, push forward. I don't know. So I think we need to know that before we wade in.
Thank you for that. So just some more information, and we can continue that conversation. I think some up here, I know Councilor Abel would remember, but we did used to oil the eggs and did some different remediation, which got some folks very upset about that as well. So we'll just keep with our cardboard coyotes for a while until we learn more. Cool. All right. And thank you. So I had mentioned last week a request for consensus to sign a letter to the, actually it would go to Secretary of State Pompeo, and I sent along information for refugee resettlement in Lakewood. The International Rescue Committee is actually headquartered here in Lakewood. You saw in the information, just for the folks in the audience, refugees in the city of Lakewood over the past 2 fiscal years has been 19 individuals. Their countries of origin, 31% from Belarus, 50% the Democratic Republic of Congo, 5% from Uganda, 5% from Zambia. So when they do come, and this program has been reduced quite a bit, when they do come to Lakewood, oftentimes from what we've learned, a lot of them go to Aurora because they come to Colorado, they have family here, and a lot of the family is in Aurora. But some of those folks are here, and this is a letter that would look like this simple. It would be, this letter is in reference to Executive Order 13888 on enhancing state and local involvement in resettlement. The City of Lakewood, via consensus of the mayor and city council, consent to initial refugee resettlement in Lakewood, Colorado, as per terms of the executive order. So there's nothing different that has gone on prior or asking. It's just a new layer. Our county commissioners have given permission, as well as Wheat Ridge is taking it up tonight. Arvada has accepted it. Golden has accepted it. Who am I missing? I don't know about Edgewater. And then, of course, the state of Colorado, the city and county of Denver, Douglas County, a lot of other communities. So the ask is just consensus. I know there were folks that wanted some more information. We can certainly get that. And the IRC, again, is headquartered here. So if you want to have a tour and better understand what they're doing, our faith-based community is very active with helping the refugees as well, and they have a lot of volunteer opportunities. So with that, I would ask for your consensus to sign that. Okay, so I have consensus, and I'll sign that on behalf of council and the city of Lakewood. Thank you all very much. That's it for general business. Council reports. In light of the fact that it's 9:20, I am not going to say another word. We're going to get out of here. Councilor Abel?
Had a great ward meeting last Saturday. Enough said.
Councilor Springsteen?
No report.
Councilor Gutwein?
Our regular Ward 5 meeting that is on the first Saturday of the month is for February going to be at the same exact time as our council planning retreat. So we would like to invite all Ward 5 residents to come and join us at our planning retreat so that you can see the sausage making in action, as it were. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Skilling.
A very special thank you to all in attendance for not divulging what is waiting for me on my DVR when I get home. So thank you for not addressing that topic. Thank you.
By the way,
Councilor Abel is ready to spill the beans.
Councilor Skilling's really excited about what happened on The Bachelor, so that's good. Well, I just wanted to say it's good to be back and Happy New Year.
Welcome back. Councilor Harrison?
No report.
Councilor Franks? Councilor Johnson?
No report.
Councilor Beta? Councilor Vincent? Ms. Millard? Mr. Cox? Mr. Goldstein? All right, we will adjourn. Thank you to our police agent for keeping us safe tonight. For everybody coming out.